Picture Paris. What's the first thing that pops into your head? It's this, right? The Eiffel Tower. It's on postcards, it's in movies, it's the ultimate symbol of romance and art. But what if I told you it's not really a building? That we've been looking at it all wrong. Today, we are going to peel back the iron lattice and show you the incredible, revolutionary machine that's been hiding in plain sight all along. Seriously, think about it. It moves, it flexes, it has these complex mechanical organs pumping inside of it, and it needs constant, hands-on maintenance just to stay alive. This is not some static stone monument. It's a piece of dynamic, 19th century tech that completely rewrote the rules for how we build our world. So to really get it, we've got to go back to the beginning. The tower was dreamt up by Gustav Eiffel's company to be the show-stopping entrance for the 1889 World's Fair. But here's the crazy part. It was never supposed to be permanent. Nope, the original plan was to tear it down after just 20 years. I mean, can you imagine the challenge? Building a 300-meter tall tower back then was pure science fiction. Nothing even came close. But the key was Gustav Eiffel's company. They weren't famous for buildings. Their specialty was giant iron railway bridges. So they took everything they knew about making things light, strong, and wind-resistant, and they aimed it straight for the sky.
Now, the material they used was a total game changer. It's not steel like we'd use today. The tower is built from something called puddle iron, which is this incredibly pure type of wrought iron. Basically, it's iron with almost no carbon in it, which makes it super durable but also really flexible. And most importantly, it had this amazing strength-to-weight ratio. That was the secret sauce for building tall without the whole thing collapsing on itself.
And here's how they pulled it off. The tower is basically one gigantic erector set. It's made of 18,038 individual pieces of iron, and every single one was designed with insane mathematical precision, built in Eiffel's factory, and then brought to the site to be assembled. This idea, modular off-site construction, was way ahead of its time. It's how we build skyscrapers now. So what holds all those pieces together? 2.5 million rivets. And the process was incredible. A team of 4 guys would heat a rivet until it was glowing red hot, shove it into a hole, and then hammer it into shape. As that rivet cooled down, it would shrink, pulling the 2 pieces of iron together with immense force, creating a joint that was literally stronger than the metal it was holding. So all that iron adds up to about 7,300 tons. Now, that sounds like a lot, right? But for a structure that's 300 meters tall, it is shockingly light. Here's a wild way to think about it. If you could melt down the entire iron structure, it would only fill the square base of the tower to a depth of about 6 centimeters. That's it. But being so light created this huge new problem: wind. This was the #1 engineering puzzle they had to solve. How do you stop a giant hollow metal kite from getting knocked over? Well, the answer starts deep underground, with foundations sunk more than 22 feet deep, creating an anchor that just would not budge. But the real secret weapon is hidden in plain sight. That iconic curve of the tower, it's not just for looks. It's a perfect exponential curve, a brilliant piece of math designed to do one thing: defeat the wind. The shape catches all that wind force and funnels it perfectly down the 4 legs and into those deep foundations. It's so effective that the tower can actually sway up to 9 centimeters in a heavy storm, just bending with the wind instead of fighting. Okay, so the tower skeleton is genius, but a machine needs organs to function, a circulatory system to bring it to life. And for the Eiffel Tower, that meant elevators. This is where the machine really starts to breathe. You see, getting elevators up those curved legs was a problem nobody had ever solved before, and it kicked off this amazing engineering showdown. On 2 legs, a French company installed a system that used a kind of jointed chain to push the cabins up from below. But on the other 2 legs, the American company Otis installed a faster, quieter hydraulic system that pulled the cars up an inclined track. It was a marvel. And unbelievably, some of that original hydraulic machinery is still working today. And for that final steep climb to the very top, they needed yet another system. This one was designed by Leon Adeau, and it was so clever, it used 2 elevator cars that worked like a seesaw to balance each other out. One car went from the 2nd floor up to a midway point, while the other came down from the summit to meet it. You just get out, walk across the platform, and get into the other car to finish the trip. So, you have this incredibly complex machine. How do you keep it running? Its 20,000 light bulbs need constant changing. Its structure is always being monitored. But its greatest enemy, its lifelong nemesis, is rust. And the battle against it is a paint job that literally never ends. And you know who knew this best? The man himself, Gustav Eiffel.
He said that paint wasn't just for looks, it was the tower's armor. He knew that this constant, meticulous painting was the single most important thing for making sure his creation would last.
And that's a job they take very, very seriously. Every 7 years, a team of 25 painters spends a year and a half applying 60 metric tons of paint, completely by hand, with brushes. It is an absolutely staggering amount of work just to protect every nook and cranny of that 7,300-ton iron frame.
Oh, and by the way, the tower hasn't always been the color it is now. It's had a few different outfits over the years. It started out as a dark Phoenician red, and for a while it was even a kind of yellow-orange. It wasn't until 1968 that it settled on its signature Eiffel Tower brown. And here's a little secret. It's actually painted in 3 slightly different shades, darkest at the bottom, lightest at the top, so that it looks perfectly uniform against the sky. How cool is that? The tower's impact didn't just stay in Paris. Its ideas, its design, its engineering DNA, it spread all across the globe. It literally became the blueprint for building tall. You can see its influence so clearly in places like the Tokyo Tower. Built in 1958, it uses that exact same open lattice principle. It was a way of saying, hey, we can build an icon for our city too, proving just how timeless Eiffel's engineering really was.
And then, of course, you've got the straight-up copies, like the half-scale replica in Las Vegas. It just goes to show you that this one design has become a universal symbol for an entire city and country. So when you really break it down, its legacy is just immense. It proved you could build to the heavens with light, strong iron instead of heavy stone. The way it was built in pieces off-site became the standard for modern skyscrapers. Its lattice design became the model for basically every radio and TV tower in the world. And it taught us the fundamentals of how to make tall buildings that won't fall down in the wind. It was truly a blueprint for the future. So in the end, it all comes back to that never-ending paint job. As one expert said, the puddle iron itself is so pure and resilient that as long as you protect it from rust, the Eiffel Tower can, in theory, last forever. So the next time you see a picture of the Eiffel Tower, don't just see a pretty landmark. See a survivor. See a machine that was supposed to die after 20 years, but has kept running for over a century. See the machine that taught us how to build the modern world, and one that, with a little bit of care, might just be around forever.